Welcome to the launch of Junction Reads 2023-2024 season and the virtual launch of Kathryn Mockler's hybrid collection of stories, anecdotes from Book Hug Press. This was a fantastic, hey, Kirby, that's beautiful. This was a fantastic read. I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to talk about it. But before we dive into Kathryn's biography and we get to hear her read from the collection, I am going to ask Kathryn what she's currently reading so that I can make my TBR pile even bigger.
I just muted myself. Forgive me, everyone. I have a cough, so if I can get through this without too much disturbance. But thank you so much, Allison, Junction Reads, for having me. I'm joining you from the Lekwungen territory in Victoria, and I'm really I'm reading a lot. I've been recently gotten on TikTok. Yes, there are old broads like me on TikTok. And I'm totally obsessed with it. And it's giving me, it's making me have a bit of a book fetish. So I'm like reading like 30 things right now. Which is fun. But I just bought the Out There Screaming, an anthology of new Black horror, which was edited by Jordan Peele. I'm really interested. I'm really getting into literary genre writing right now, and I think maybe that's the influence of TikTok. I'm not quite sure. I'm also reading another genre anthology, the 2019 acclaimed collection Palestine Plus 100, which obviously weighs heavily right now, considering everything that's happening in Gaza as we speak. But this anthology posed the question to 12 Palestinian writers, what might your country look like in the year 2048? And it has science fiction, noir, dystopian, and high-tech farce. I just finished Lindsay Wong's book, Tell Me Pleasant Things About Immortality. And it's for those interested in leeches, cannibalism, and ghosts. And I'm also reading Queers Like Me by Michael V. Smith, who I'm along with Sandra Ridley or Ridley. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure. I haven't asked her how she pronounces her name, but and I'll be reading Vixen as well. But I'm currently reading Queers Like Me, Michael V. Smith's book, and we're going on tour at the end of the month to a multi-city tour in person. So I'm really excited about that. And I have published two of their, or I had published works by Michael and Sandra on my newsletter, Send My Love to Anyone.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I also loved Lindsay Wong's book. I keep going in and out of it. It's so good.
Yeah.
I am going to share your biography with everybody, if that's okay, before we hear you read from Anecdotes. And I completely forgot to share our acknowledgement. Oh, I'm so sorry. Junction Reads exists in Toronto, which for thousands, weird. Should have turned that off. I'm sorry. Junction Reads exists in Toronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wyandot, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and Mississaugas of the Credit. It is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. I am sorry, I'm going to just take 1 minute to figure out how to turn off the notifications. Sorry, I won't. I'll just, I am so sorry about that, Kathryn. I'm going to read your biography before we go.
That's okay.
I'll edit it out. I'll edit that interruption out.
That's okay.
Kathryn Mockler is a writer, screenwriter, experimental filmmaker, editor, and publisher. She is the author of a poetry chapbook, Me, Then You, Then Me, Then, from Knife Book, published in 2020. It was written in collaboration with Gary Barwin. She co-edited co-edited the print anthology Watch Your Head, Writers and Artists Respond to the Climate Crisis, and is the publisher of the Watch Your Head website. Other writing has been published in Catapult, Quill and Choir, Fence, Arc Magazine, Geist, This Magazine, and others. Her films have screened at TIFF, EMFA, the Palm Springs Film Festival, and most recently at the Arizona Underground Film Festival and Real Poetry in Houston, Texas. She is an assistant professor of writing at the University of Victoria. She runs the literary newsletter Send My Love to Anyone. Anecdotes was published by Book Hug Press a month ago.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kathryn.
Thanks so much for everyone who has joined us today. Normally I plan out what I'm going to read, but for some reason this book seems to be a mood book for me. So sort of depends. Just one second. I just want to put my timer on. We're looking at 10 minutes about for the reading. Okay. Sorry.
We are very flexible with that time.
Oh, are we? Okay.
Yeah.
But before I begin, I wanted to talk about a little bit about Watch Your Head. It was published in 2020, and because of world circumstances, it didn't really have its day, and it probably, if it had come out this year, it might have been a bit of a different story. But anyways, a lot of people worked on this anthology. I can't remember, I think we have over 89 contributors, and there were 14 editors, including myself. And the reason I mentioned this book, it was published by Coach House Book, and you can order it online, and proceeds are donated to Raven Trust. Yeah, it's just a really important project to me, and I've sort of vowed that on this book tour, I'm also going to acknowledge many of the people who were part of it. Adam Giles, who I say it's here, was a contributor on the website Watch Your Head. Kirby's been a contributor and an editor on the Watch Your Head website and in the anthology, and Kathryn Graham as well. And if I'm missing anybody, I'm so sorry. I'm sure there are more people, but I just want to take time to acknowledge it's a really important project. It really, while it's about the climate crisis, it's also about oppression and injustice, which is, relevant with every breath that we take and the ways that we participate in these oppressive systems. So it's very important to me, but also it's important to me because it was the context in which many of these works and anecdotes were collected, and some were written during and after, and some were written before, but their inclusion, was impacted by, by all these events. So there's an important connection for me between the two projects. Okay. For those of you who don't know, the book is in 4 sections. There's sort of hyper-realism, absurdist comedy, and things in between. And so I'm just going to read a little bit from each of the sections. The first one are these sort of absurdist stories, and also a lot of the pieces are flash fiction, and that's what I'm going to read mostly flash fiction for today. Which just means very short stories. Let's play oil slick. This is a play. 2 children are playing together in a schoolyard. A says, let's play oil slick. B says, I get to be the bird and you can be the rescuer. A, I want to be the bird. Now wash my hair. B, you washed my hair. You were the bird last time. A, I'm not playing unless I get to play the character I want. B, why don't you be the bird and I'll be the sea otter? A, who will rescue us? B, nobody. Walking. I'll walk with my head down because I hate myself, and you'll walk with your eyes on your phone because you hate everyone else, and maybe we'll crash into each other on the sidewalk. It's anticipation that's keeping me alive. If you're cold, take off your sweater and come inside. And if you need a drink, get it yourself from the beer fridge. I'm not the host. I'm just sitting here waiting to see what's going to happen next. It's exciting, even if on the surface everything looks ordinary. The water glasses next to the table, the throw pillows on the green couch, the wind rustling the leaves in the trees while someone throws a lit cigarette into the street. In a moment, it might rain, but maybe not. But it doesn't matter because it's anticipation that's keeping me alive. Yesterday, a snail crossed my path on the sidewalk. I picked her up and put her in the garden so she wouldn't get crushed by my foot when she hadn't even made it to the halfway mark of her journey. The snail's plight wasn't any of my business, but I have a savior complex. I don't think she appreciated my intervention because she crawled into her house and didn't come out. Where are you in your journey? And what would make you retreat into your shell? I'm in the blue void, but something will happen eventually. I just know it. Now, there's a maxi pad on the cover of this book, so I would be remiss if I did not read one of the period stories. When I was younger, I didn't like period writing for some reason. I know why from the culture, yeah. So it was really fun actually to sort of embrace this sort of talking about the simple stories of periods that we really don't see that often, even though more than half the population bleeds. So, and I was really delighted. I really want to thank, I also want to thank Book Hug for publishing this book and Malcolm Sutton for this beautiful design, which is, funny and, kind of, is sort of a symbol of shame that I really appreciate, because there are a lot of stories in this book that deal with shame as well. The pad. When I was 10, I stuck one of my mother's unused maxi pads to my bedroom wall. It had fallen out of the linen closet and was just lying on the bathroom floor. When I saw it there, I peeled off the paper strip and stuck the pad to the wall. I didn't care who saw my wall art, my mom, my best friend, my sister. I didn't feel shame because I didn't know there was anything to be ashamed of. I knew about periods and that pads were there to soak up the blood. It's a pad. Who cares? I said when anyone inquired. It's a beautiful piece of art, I laughed. My pad art delighted me until one day my mom's friend from university and her daughter were visiting from out of town. The daughter, Emma, was a year older than me. Her long red hair and freckled face could be found every year on the Christmas card that her mother sent. Not a picture of the family, just Emma, who she bragged endlessly about in the letter. Emma was perfect in every sense of the word. She got straight A's and was on the girls' basketball team, was popular, artistic, and beautiful. Emma was also the kind of person who spoke in a way that made you think she was always making fun of you. She would say things like, "Where did you get those shoes?" In a must-have tone, like, "Where did you get those?" I can't do it. "Where did you get those shoes?" In a must-have tone about a pair of old dirty runners, the byway. Right, she nodded, like she was storing the information for a future dig. Around Emma, I was a clumsy, ugly duckling who was just trying to get through these visits without making a fool out of myself or getting ridiculed. The only thing that made Emma and me remotely friends or connected in any way was that both our mothers were alcoholics. When they drank together, it was even worse than when they drank alone. They would get sloppy, crying, fighting drunk, and pass out, leaving cigarettes burning in the ashtray, lights on, the record player spinning. Emma's visits were about the only time I cleaned my messy bedroom. I displayed cool things around my room that I thought would impress Emma, like my sticker books, my teen magazines, my B-52 records. But when Emma came into my room, the first thing she saw was the pad. "Why do you have a maxi pad on your wall?" she asked. She was not impressed. She did not think it was funny or that it was art. Mortified, I ripped the pad down and said I didn't want to lose it. Shame washed over me as I squeezed the pad in my hand, wishing I could be someone else, wishing I hadn't done such a strange thing. Aren't you too young to have a period? She asked. I don't have a period. I just have a pad on my wall, I said. We moved on to other topics, but I could tell that something had shifted. Not only was I an ugly duckling, but I was also now weird and gross. And once someone decides that you're weird and gross, like the kids who pick their nose or shit their pants at school, there's no going back. Are they drinking? I asked, hoping to rekindle our connection about our moms. My mom doesn't drink anymore, Emma said. Emma wouldn't look at me for the rest of the visit. I was strange and she was not. She was normal and I was not. She sat in the living room listening to our mums reminisce while I stayed in my room, too embarrassed to join them. After Emma and her mother left, I looked down at the pad, which remained crumpled on my bed. I smoothed it out and was about to put it back on the wall, but thought maybe I should put it somewhere less obvious, like behind my bedroom door or under the desk or beside my window. None of these places pleased me. It just wasn't the same. At one point, I even threw it out because the adhesive began to lose its stickiness and it just kept falling off the wall. But my bedroom looked empty without the maxi pad, so I pulled it out of the trash and used masking tape to secure it back into its original place. And I'm going to read from, I'm actually going to skip over some of the sections. When I started reading this story, I thought it was a different story. And I didn't realize it was a 3-page story. So I'm going to, I promised Allison that I would read from my dream house, which are it's a series of stories between the past and the future. And they sort of get up to no good and are constantly fighting with each other. And I'm going to read. Okay. This is called You Don't Exist. The past, the future, and the present were enjoying the hot tub on a cool evening. The past back was sore, and the future was practicing mindfulness. The present looked at them both and frowned. I feel left out when I'm around you, too. Here we go, said the past. The future made a soft humming sound to block out the chatter because they had just reached the point where they could divert every thought as it came into their mind. Seriously, said the present, you two are a clique. Have you ever considered, said the past, that you may feel left out because you might not even exist? In fact, you, or rather the concept of you, may be an impossibility. The present shook their head and started to laugh. Hilarious. That is just so funny I could weep. My therapist said it's okay to let go of people who are having a negative impact on your life. I think he has a point. I have some theories about you, but I wouldn't be so rude as to say them to your face. I was telling you how I felt when I'm with you two. I was expressing myself in order to deepen our relationship. You don't need to tell everyone everything you think about them if it's going to hurt their feelings. Sorry, but I have an honesty problem, said the past. When I lie, people see right through me. Would you two knock it off, said the future. I'm trying to meditate and move into a deep state of relaxation. The present shook their head and lifted themselves out of the hot tub. The past watched the present grab a towel and head towards the house. Are you naked? Asked the past. I'm wearing swim trunks, said the future, who looked over at the present's bare ass shining in the moonlight. I am too, said the past, and they laughed together about the present's nakedness. We're awful, howled the past. It's true, cried the future, who laughed so hard they got a stitch in their side. Okay, I think that that's about 10, little over 10 minutes.
I absolutely love it's in the 4th section of the novel for anyone who hasn't read it yet. These stories between the past, present, and future are sometimes sadistic, sometimes sociopathic. I love them so much. I want to talk about writing, which is what I always want to talk about when I sit with an author and their book. But this as a multi-genre writer, and this being a mix of autofictions and surreal realist stories and flash fictions and all that, I want to talk about how you know when when a spark of an idea is going to be a flash, when it's going to be a poem, when it's going to be much bigger and show up on the screen.
Yeah, I don't really know because I don't really think about genre. Like I really feel like I'm a genre-less writer. Like my short fiction are plays. When I write screenplays, they're more like plays than screenplay. Like everything. I think I'm actually a playwright, but I've never worked in the genre before because I really like dialogue. So I write dialogue. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been asked this question a lot, and I don't really, I know genre purists will, might not like this, but I really don't care about genre. Genre to me is only a box to put something in a category once I want to publish it.
Right.
And when my previous poetry, I mean, I've taught poetry for 15 years, but I always felt like a fake poet because the concerns of poets are not my concerns. In terms of literary devices. So
Right.
other than length, I'm like length and I'm interested in narrative and image. And so, these short pieces could be considered poems. Some have been published as poems and
Mhm.
some have been published as stories. So this is a long answer to say I really feel like I'm genreless and I just hear voices in my head and then I write them down, and sometimes they want to be long and sometimes they want to be short, and then the world of publishing asks me to categorize them, and so then but now I think it's all fiction. It's fiction writing, whether it's one line or that feels right for me right now.
Yeah. And so in that moment when you like at the end of a piece, when you yourself have to categorize it either to submit it to a literary journal or um, put it into a collection of some sort, do you define that or do you leave it up to
I do
the
like if there's
reader?
an opportunity for like I'm gonna submit to like the CBC contest and they're asking for poetry, I would call it poetry.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a chameleon. That I mean, when I first submitted this book initially, I called it poetry, and then I had a meeting with Jay and Hazel. I'm like, this is not poetry. This isn't poetry. Yeah. So yeah. So that's it. Really is just, oh, is there an opportunity? Sure, I'll. Many things I've published similar things both as poems, and so that's, I mean, for me it's arbitrary. I know other people don't feel that way about
Yeah.
particularly poetry. I was recently reading Lydia Davis, who seems to be the only person who can get away with writing flash fiction in some ways. She's always referenced, but she just always called her stuff fiction. That was the end of it, even though
Right.
she realizes some of her stuff has been published as poetry as well. So if length determines genre, which I don't think it does. Anyways, it's all about like I'm just
Yeah.
not interested in the binary of genre.
Yeah. And I mean that in and of itself speaks to the creation of art. And once the art is created, it doesn't belong to you anyway. And so it's up to the reader to decide whether it's poetry to them or they visualize it as a mini play. Like much of the dialogue pieces in here, I did think in the dialogue pieces about your role as a screenwriter, and I thought, oh, this is interesting that she really writes dialogue incredibly well. And how did this end up as a story written in dialogue as opposed to a story written more narratively? um
Yeah,
but I will take that answer for that as well,
sure.
that it just kind of exists as it exists at the end of creating it.
And then I often use material like the whole second section of the book, which I didn't read from. Um, look on the page like poems, but they're disembodied voices having a conversation, and it's called This Isn't a Conversation. This is actually a video series. So, and that is screened in festivals. So I
Oh,
have good,
interesting.
yeah. So I often, and poems have been made into short films and things like that. Like, so that often there's a lot of conversation between different genres and media.
There is a very I mean, I can't define all of the pieces in this, for me anyway, this collection as image driven. A lot of them are far too emotional for me on a personal level to be image driven. But you do have a lot of imagery, a lot of moments where the reader can get stuck kind of imagining that they're in a space, a physical space that you describe really well. So I can see that. But you mentioned this piece, this section of black paper with white fonted words, I guess. How did you know that, or if you did know, if in creating, you had an idea when this collection was put together, it was going to be in 4 parts. It was going to be in 4 parts as distinctive as these are structurally. Did you know that?
I didn't really know that. I work on multiple things alongside each other.
Mhm.
And at one point, I didn't know how they fit together. And I remember saying and I had a lot of struggle writing this book. I had a huge writer block, and the publication was delayed. And there was a struggle. My biggest struggle was, how do I fit this hyper realism with this absurdity? How do I put those together? And I remember once I said, I was talking to Malcolm, who edited the book. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, why am I writing about like sexual assault and violence against women and environmental catastrophe? Malcolm said, I think there might be a link between the two. And it was very obvious. That's why you need an editor. It
Right.
was very obvious. And kind of once he said that, I sort of, okay, I know what I'm doing with this book now. And then it really gelled everything together. Yeah.
Nice. And that in writing, I mean, I can see how they're connected, but in writing in writing about environmental catastrophe, and you say it specifically in a number of these pieces, that it's easy to not easy. It's natural, I guess, to not think about it, to, live in the present and just not think about the future and just let it do its thing, I guess. But in writing some of these pieces, and again, that I'm going to speak from my personal experience as a reader and what I put into reading this. Some of these pieces were difficult for me to read. Again, my own personal experiences being imposed on it. But how were some of them to write? And at any point in time, were you writing something and did you think to yourself, I can't say that, or I won't say it that way, or you know what, I'm not going to talk about this, and therefore now that story doesn't exist?
You mean in the whole collection, or just the black section?
No, in the whole collection, sorry.
Oh, in the whole, no. No, there are more that have come out since writing, no, I mean, we did have to edit it down for, it had to be under 300 pages. But no, I didn't. I was not afraid that I was saying something like offensive or anything. It just, these are my values around
Yeah.
issues of oppression and climate crisis. I'm not, yeah. So, and also around, my personal, auto fiction and things like that. I use auto fiction to protect the assholes.
Right.
I use that term. But and also it gives me, I do invent. They're not every single thing. There's things that are invented for narrative purposes. Like in the real story, I took the pad down and threw it out. But
Right.
that's not what the story I wanted to tell. So You know, there are things that are true and things that are invented but come from truth. And so that's why I really like autofiction, as that gives me
Yeah.
lots of freedom.
Like the names have been changed
Oh
to
yeah.
like not
Names and
protect the
even
guilty, but
details.
yeah.
Yeah, not, I mean, not really to protect that. It just,
Yeah.
yeah, not to protect them, but just yeah, if I invent whole new characters, and you know, not every single person in here is
A real person.
exactly a real person. No, no. It's
Yeah.
uh but the feelings and some of that are it all comes from something real, but the circumstantial some of the circumstances aren't might not be correct on purpose. Yeah.
Right. And the a couple of pieces you the characters have intrusive thoughts or act on impulse, usually to their own detriment, something happening to them that's not that great. Um, can you talk about that? How in developing a character that does or says something that's not going to help them, and your, I guess I don't really want to talk about your experience with that, but I've had kind of an obsession recently thinking about intrusive thoughts and finding characters who have them and
Oh,
act
okay.
on them. So I want to talk to you about that. Does
What do you have a story or two that you're referencing?
uh
The whole book is an intrusive thought.
I know, I don't I mean
Actually.
the things that I saved are the ones that I want to read over and over and over again, but I don't. I can't. I'm trying to think of a
Are like,
character.
I'm just wondering, are you referencing like one example of that? There's a story where the character gets harassed by a bus driver and she starts screaming at him.
No,
It's not,
the bus driver one is great. I was glad that she ended up
yeah.
yelling at him
Oh,
and
okay, okay.
in the end, what she does at the
Yeah.
dinner party is also perfectly fine. No, oh my God, I can't think of
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
it,
Yeah, I mean,
whatever
I
story it
think
is, it's at the beginning. It is a child who acts impulsively, but I can't
so funny. I don't
I
even,
can't
you know,
even think of,
you
I
forget your
know.
own things. So I'm not quite sure what story you're referencing, but yeah, I mean, I just think the whole thing is intrusive thoughts. I mean, that's sort of the writing process in some ways. Like we have these things floating around in our head, and they come down. But I'm I'm not quite sure which story you're referencing. So
No,
yeah,
I'll find it afterwards and then
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
send you a note. I'll add
Oh,
it to
good.
the comments in the YouTube thing. But I love, and again, my sort of follow up to that was the idea of adolescents and children wanting so desperately to express those thoughts, those honest thoughts, and being held down either by their parents or by their, little society of friends at school. Um, how do you ever think to yourself, I'd love either 13-year-old Kathryn Mockler or another 13-year-old girl to read this?
I I would. I just don't know if their parents would want them to read it.
Right.
That does go. I mean, like we were reading V.C. Andrews when we were 10, so I mean, it's a different world. And so yeah, I mean, I would like particularly. It's like someone asked me, "Oh, is this appropriate for teenagers?" Yeah, and maybe in 1985, but not now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in terms of a warning to, you know, inhabiting the body of a woman in the world is there's some important stories there around that as well.
Yeah. It's interesting how if you think of, when I think about myself in what I was reading at the age of 13, and that it was really a free for all. Like I could get out any book from the library.
Hmm.
No
Yeah,
librarian ever said to me, are you sure you want to read this? This is about the end of the world, or,
yeah,
or whatever. But we
Yeah,
talked.
I would like them to read it. I just don't, I don't
Yeah.
know what people give 13-year-olds to read right now. So
Yeah. Or who they would have to have a conversation with about it after they read it, right?
yeah, because there isn't, it's just the details. It's an anecdote. So then you have to decide what you think about it. So yeah.
Yeah. I would love if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. Kaylee's gonna ask on your behalf at the end. But I would love to talk to you about the story contest. You and I were talking about it before everybody came in, but I was convinced that I was there when it happened, but I wasn't. And that's because your newsletter, Send My Love to Anyone, is just so fantastic and intimate. And I urge everyone here to subscribe if you are not already a subscriber. Can you talk about that experience just from a writer's perspective? And given most of the people here are writers and people listening to the video are probably writers.
Yeah, so when I was at UBC, I was a grad student. I had written a haiku for Geist's Great Canadian Haiku Contest, which I wouldn't do now because I'm not really interested in the nationalism of the great nation, anything. But at the time, I submitted a haiku that was a story about my father. I think it was my father's canoe falls from the roof of the car onto the dirt road. And it was a story he had told me. I wasn't even with him when it happened. But I thought, oh, that's a great image. Anyway, it turned out that everyone hated when the winners were announced, they published alongside the runners up. And because it was called the Great Canadian Haiku, everyone decided to weigh in that they thought my haiku was shit and was not the great haiku. And there were conspiracy theories running around. This is, there was a little bit of internet, but not much at that time. So, but the conversations were happening in newspapers. It got picked up by the CBC and the Utne Reader, and people were accusing me of having either an intimate or personal relationship with David McFadden, who was the judge, and that he had picked, or that I had sought out the cover of his book, because apparently the cover of one of his books had a picture of a red canoe on the roof of a car. And so they thought that I had written it in order to win favor with the judge. Anyway, people were fighting on all sides. There were letters to the editor for like 4 or 5 issues. I found it all very hilarious. I was like, who is getting worked up about this haiku? But the really funny thing is that the person everybody wanted to win was Gary Barwin, who I didn't know at the time. We didn't know each other at all. And everyone was saying his poem was the best and why didn't it win and what a shame, and on in defense of Gary Barwin. Anyways, we of course became friends and co-writers. We published a book with Knife Fork book, which is run by Kirby, called You Then Me Then You Then what is it? Anyway, You Then Me Then You Then. So just so hilarious that someone who actually ended up becoming a friend and collaborator was my rival in this ridiculous sort of Canadiana asserting who's going to write, the best haiku. Anyways, and then people were also fighting about the form because, the 757 is not, and anyways, it was very funny. It was very funny.
Yeah.
Thing that had happened. Yeah.
And what's Gary's perspective on it now? Was he even thinking about it?
Gave me for the I wrote about it in Send My Love to Anyone, and then there's a story based on it, so they're kind of connected in that way. But the piece in the nonfiction piece in Send My Love to Anyone, I asked him to just write some context. And so there's a quote by him, and I can't remember what he said, but it was like, obviously he also thought it was hilarious, and he can barely remember the incident because for him, he wasn't being attacked.
Yeah.
He can barely remember. I think he can barely remember that there was this wild, like every issue of Geist that would come, I'd be like, oh my god, is there going to be a, like Kathryn Mockler's haiku sucks.
Oh my god.
So yeah, it helped me not be too precious about work, and I'm able to withstand criticism and negative feedback. So,
Yeah, it must have been so awful as a young writer, though. Like,
oh no, it was funny. I thought it was
yeah.
hilarious. Like, I remember the CBC called me and they were very condescending and they're like,
Oh
do you
God.
think you'll ever write anything again? I'm like, well, I'm in a creative writing program. I'm pretty sure I'm going to write something again. It was just the whole thing was hilarious. And the fact, like, how could she have won unless she was like, doing inappropriate things with the judge? Like,
Oh my
it
God.
was so ridiculous.
Bananas.
Anyways, I'd lost all my copies and I reached out to Geist and I was able to get all the back issues. So I
Oh,
was able to
nice.
write that piece. Yeah. Yeah.
That's I don't know if anyone has any questions, Kaylee. I want to talk again, as I mentioned, I love those past, present, future stories. And so I want to talk about the last story of the collection, because it finishes with the future asking the past, things always get better, don't they? In an attempt to kind of cheer themselves along. And this kind of feeds into the this earlier structural question, but I want to talk to you specifically about this one and how it became the final story in the collection.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm trying to remember. It was between, I think, Sunset and that. I think, I mean, it's a little bleak, but there's also, you could read hope in there as well. Like things always, things could get better if we changed, if we weren't so violent with one another, if we cared
Sure.
about things outside of
We are.
ourselves.
So don't
Things
go.
could change.
Yeah.
And I guess the only hope that there exists is that things that we can act in ways that will make things change. But yeah, so it's meant to be neutral, so not neutral, but a little bit of hope and a little bit despairing.
Right.
Do I personally think things will change? I don't know. I think the act of art is an act of hope anyway, and that's what I had a long uh after being involved in an environmental group and then doing the anthology. I went through a period of extreme climate grief, which led to kind of a creative block, and it was through writing that got me out of it. So I see that there is hope in making work and trying to connect with people.
Yeah, I hope. I don't know what to say about what's happening right now, but I hope that the art, it tends to be I'm not sure about your experience, but it tends to be the artists in times like this, and not the celebrities, but the artists in times like this who come out with the right thing to say, the right feeling to express. And so I hope that art will help us out of this situation, I guess. It's hard to even call it a situation. But I am so grateful that you came to us and read from Anecdotes and shared your feelings about writing. Kaylee, do we have any questions?
None yet.
Oh, there you go. So I want to invite you, Kathryn, because we have time and I know how important Watch Your Head is to you. I would love to invite you. We have about 15 minutes. If you want to read something from Watch Your Head or an excerpt from something from Watch Your Head, I would love that.
Okay, let me think. Well, I feel this poem, the anthology came about because I'd organized a literary event, and I invited readers to come out, and yeah, it was a really special event. Adam was there, and there were many other people involved in this project were there. But yeah, I think I'll read Terese Mason Pierre's piece. It's a little long, but I find it's a very powerful poem, and she's also given me her permission to read it and share it with people. So we will tell them of our dominion. First, we will tell them of our dominion. We will tell them of the web peeling back in the heavens, the sun's maw radiating. We will tell them we can see the air. We will tell them green turned to brown and gray. We will tell them green covered the earth. We will tell them of plastic islands. We will tell them of sands too hot to inhabit. We will tell them of where people cannot hold their breath forever. We will tell them of undulating obituaries. We will tell them of backroom deals, of slow-moving cogs. We will tell them of childhood depression. We will tell them of corporate footprints, handprints, fingers and pies stained red. We will tell them of mass delusion. We will tell them of moral misbehavior. We will tell them of fears for marble over feather and fur. We will tell them of the non-identity problem. We will tell them of the powerful two-faced. We will tell them why the scientists cried. We will tell them why the philosophers cried. We will tell them why the parents cried. We will tell them of carbon dioxide, shouts of splintered protests. We will tell them of tear gas, of turned heads. We will tell them of laws broken. We will tell them of backs broken. We will tell them of turning. Later, we will tell them the oil barons are dead. We will tell them guardians fought back. We will tell them a panacea was birthed from the Amazon ash. We will tell them blood is not translucent, but still pumping. We will tell them the ocean is still loud. We will tell them we relocated the sacred. We will tell them we refined our brains. We will tell them the sun is everything. We will tell them we were sorry. We will tell them we know why the sky is blue. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was beautiful. I'm really glad that we got to hear.
And it's on the Watch Your Head. Kaylee has shared it as well. Thank you. It's on the website.
Nice. And yeah, and all of this will be all of the books that Kathryn talked about, and all of the Kaylee links to a lot of stuff, and all of that will be on the underneath the YouTube video when I share it, if you want to go and find it afterwards. Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and for everyone who's come. I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited for Anecdotes. I feel like it's going to be a book read by many and talked about for a long time. I loved it for its uniqueness, for its honesty, for all of the truths that you share in it. And that is it. Thank you everyone for coming. We are going to be launching our in-person event on October 29th. Type Books in the Junction has graciously offered up their accessible space to us. Kathryn Kuttenbauer, B.H. Panhusen, and Paola Ferrante are going to join us on October 29th. And that's it. Thank you so much. Kaylee, thank you so much for being there as always, supporting with the tech stuff.
Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks,
Bye,
Kathryn.
everyone.
Have a great evening.